if you're in this room, you should be in for the panel evil player characters. So, I'm the moderator. My name is Kenneth Justiniano, and I will allow these great people that are up here to introduce themselves first. My style of moderation is we start out with a question up here for the panel, and then I allow you guys to ask a question. And we'll keep going back and forth until our hours up. All right. So, introduce yourself.
Sure. Afternoon, folks. I'm Steve Semler. I am a leadership and mental fitness coach here in the Twin Cities, and I've been playing role-playing games since 1980, starting off with whatever boxed set of books, the Gygax books before then were. Developed a few things along the way, played lots of role-playing systems, and alignment is an interesting thing that I've been exploring because my side career is as a science fiction fantasy novelist. So I was just mentioning, one of my books is Whispers of the Dragon, where it's a reluctant paladin who doesn't want to be one. And what does he do about it? This will be fun to explore the evil side of things.
Hi, I'm Shaun Duke, by day professor of English at Regency State. That's by day. I don't remember what my identities are anymore. At night, I do the Sleeping Fantasy Show podcast, write, work as a freelance editor, do a bunch of role-playing stuff on the side. The biggest thing would be that I actually taught a rhetoric of gaming class, which involved role-playing games, and I had to change an entire lecture because my completely new students to D&D became murder hobos immediately. We had to have a conversation about what that means, so.
Personal, my pronouns are he, him, sorry.
Oh, and he, him for me as well.
I'm Crabtree, Shaker. I'm a writer, a miniature painter, and I just got my first gig as a pro DM. I'm going to be going out to Gen Con to run some stuff for Rowan Mark and Decor, which is my favorite game publishing company, so I'm very excited for that. I've played Evil PCs in 2 campaigns, and I also just wrapped up a campaign of Spire: The City Must Fall, which is a game that does not have an alignment system and says outright at the beginning of the book, while your party does have a noble goal, you will have to do some pretty reprehensible things to get there.
My name is Nat, pronouns are they, them. I've been playing various TTRPGs for 15 years, mostly playing, sometimes DMing. I generally enjoy having characters who want to do good, who are then, and I beg my DM to put them in awful, horrible, fucked up situations where they have to do bad things because I love feeling that angst. It's beautiful. My most recent go at an evil character was a necromancer who was very much a sort of Frankenstein type character where she wanted to figure out why only clerics can do true resurrection. What is the difference between the soul and the mind and the body? And so she thought that she was doing things for noble ends, was she? Who knows?
Okay, I'm going to start it off with what I think is going to be like the most broadest question, which is, how do you define evil?
Being a psychologist, I have two levels of definition. Sorry. One is like real world professional definition, where selfishness and an inability to take others' point of view or acknowledge others' needs, emotions, feelings, putting oneself above others to an extreme level. In the role-playing game environment, that gets played out in kind of the selfishness. I'm evil because I want to do what I want to do, and I'm going to do what I want to do as long as I have the power to do it. And either I enjoy, either I enjoy doing things to harm other people, or I simply don't care and I recognize that I don't care.
I have thought about this a lot, actually, and one that I kind of settle on is somewhat similar, but the idea of valuing life for life's sake is good, and lacking that value of life for life's sake is evil, for lack of a better word. Because you can value life, but still understand that, okay, sometimes people need to get hurt. There's the idea of the greater good, where harm comes to a small number of people because you're trying to help a greater number of people, that kind of thing. But is there an internal desire to protect life as much as possible and protect creatures and sentient beings as much as possible? If they don't give a crap, they're like, yeah, people will die, but I make a lot of money, so I do like money. That's kind of my rough definition, which I, of course, always like to then question and contradict myself, because that's the fun.
Yeah, I would agree with these two that there's a definite intent versus impact sort of dichotomy wrapped up in the definition of what evil is. I think if you are defining a character as evil, they know that what they are doing will have a negative impact on other people, and again, they either actively enjoy that or they just don't care, and there are other things that they prioritize over it. There are definitely characters out there who do a lot of harm to others but don't know that their actions are having those consequences, and I wouldn't necessarily lump those characters into the definition of evil necessarily, but would obviously still want to see stories in which those characters learn from what they're doing.
And I suppose I would add, because I agree with all of this, I would add, I think of it on a micro and macro level. Micro being kind of that selfishness, doing harm, on stealing from somebody. It's taking away from their ability to feed themselves, but you do it anyway because you want to. But then at that much larger level, sort of grave indifference to other sentient life. The murder hobo problem that my students ran into was they literally murdered a librarian because the librarian told them they weren't allowed to go downstairs. And then they proceeded to hide the body in books. Terrible plan. But there was a complete lack of consideration for the life that they had taken. They didn't care. It was only about preventing themselves from being caught and having done an evil act. And I think that that's much more of a macro scale, because that just scales up to increasing levels of indifference to life. So like the kobold thing, where you just run into a dungeon and murder all the kobolds and they're screaming stop, but you do it anyway. So I would say that.
If they killed the librarian and then hid the librarian in the books, would anyone be able to find the librarian's body?
It's the perfect crime.
It is. You would think it'd be the perfect crime. They thought they were staging the shelves fell and they got killed by the books, and I was like, you stabbed them with a sword. But they were like, no, we got this. It's good.
Any questions on the audience? Green.
So I feel like in a lot of D&D campaigns, there's supposed to be these heroic adventures. How do you guys deal with playing an evil character amongst your friends who are playing good characters and not having everything devolve into madness on a meta level?
That's something that is done with the good session 0 to make sure that all of our characters have the same bigger goal. So when I played a necromancer, our bigger goal was we need to figure out why there's an outbreak of zombies happening. My motivation for finding that is slightly different than the characters who just want to stop it just because it's bad. I wanted body parts for research. But our overarching goal of fight zombies is still the same.
My other piece of advice on that is pick a system that plays to that. One of the 2 evil PCs that I played was in a campaign of Heart, the City Beneath, which is all about going into this hole in reality that contains a sentient city that thinks it knows what you want. And 2 things about that. 1, splitting the party is not a death sentence in Heart. And 2, the setting of Heart is so dangerous that people pretty much rely on whoever they can in order to survive, so you will often see characters whose goals don't align in a party together just because this is the only help that we can find. And my character was, I like to describe her as Lady Gaga but cannibalistic and sticky.
So what's that neat dress made out of there?
Yeah. Funnily enough, she actually didn't wear meat dresses because her class gains powers based on what they eat, so wasting the meat on a dress would probably not be ideal. But she was in a party with one other evil character and then three characters whose goals were were more noble, but because the system allowed for splitting the party a lot more and telling different narratives, and because survival is the name of the game, and sometimes you have to align yourself with people who don't have your shared interests just to stay alive. It worked a lot better for that than say a D&D might, where the party is always expected to stick together and is generally expected to have the same common goal.
I would say consequences in the session 0, saying, like, yeah, if you want to be a really evil character, that's fine, but I'm going to treat the consequences for your actions as though you are as evil as you want to be. Which I find even within a party is really important. I'm not necessarily a fan of total party kill, but if y'all are going to go bananas and start murdering every librarian in town, the town is going to find out and they're going to come for you. So you have to sort of deal with the consequences, and that becomes a moderating force a little bit, because then it's like, okay, well, I want to be evil, but I want to be way evil, right? I have to think about my actions at least just a little bit for self-preservation.
Yeah, I find that the more to use the classic D&D alignments, lawful evil and neutral evil can get integrated into a party way more easily because they have self-control usually. Yeah. Whereas the classic chaotic evil, demon or whatever, is just like, I just love killing people, I just can't help myself. But if they're lawful evil or neutral evil, they were like, well, if I murder someone because they scuffed my shoe, then I'm going to have to might draw the attention of the town guards, and then I'll be thrown in jail, and then that will, throw a wrench in my long-term goals and plans. So,
I'll echo session 0. So talk about it with your fellow players, because if anyone is going to play an evil player character, or the party is going to be evil, the GM or DM or referee or whatever, storyteller, is going to need to essentially adhere to the rules of consequences much more than they would be if the party was in general heading off to do good things.
The one thing that I would say, you're saying the person that's playing is playing an evil character. Now, is he being a dickhead?
That's very different.
Because
that's different than alignment.
that is different than being an evil character. Yeah. You get these guys who want to play an evil character because they want to be the dickhead in the room. So, back to reiterate the session 0. Session 0 sets the standard, sets the expectations. You want to be a dickhead in my campaign? That is totally fine. Understand there are consequences. So as long as they understand that, when all of a sudden a portal opens and they get sucked to the 13th level of hell, and they're told that they have to atone, you brought it on yourself. So that's my 2 minutes.
Yeah, and sometimes that also is a conversation that needs to be had off table first before you explore in character. I wouldn't necessarily recommend, especially if you're new to DMing, I wouldn't necessarily recommend springing those consequences on players if they're not something that you have negotiated in a session 0 first.
Absolutely. Talk about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what your session 0 is there for.
Yeah. It's out of character. Session 0 is out of character to set up the game. In general, my experience has been that evil player characters need, or in a group or in a party or a session, whatever, need to have people as players who are pretty good at the line between OC and IC.
Yeah, I think that's something we're going to probably get into more detail about later on this panel.
Okay, this time around, what I'm going to do is start at this end. You get to ask a question, they get to answer.
Do we want to take any of the questions from the room?
Can I have you guys hold off well, like I said before,
Go back.
one from them, then one from you guys, then
Oh,
one
okay.
from them, then one from you guys.
Yeah.
So one question to think about that I'm kind of curious what you folks have done is around why is this, does this character, not the player, does the character know the character is evil? Is it reluctant? Is it, I'm just doing this because of circumstances, or is it wholeheartedly, yes, I love evil, yay? What's the difference between, I guess the question is, what's the difference between those, and does it matter?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, the big difference is the person that doesn't know may be doing things they think are fine, but in the end up not being so great. I've had a Star Wars game where that has happened, where characters are being basically mercenaries and they occasionally kill somebody, but they think ultimately they're doing a decently good thing. They just don't see the consequences of their actions immediately. But then the other side of that is just the people that are just indiscriminate. They just don't really care. Playing a Sith or something in a Star Wars campaign would be akin to that, at least if you're an unconflicted Sith. But you can be conflicted, I suppose, where you just go in and you're like, you know what, I want this thing done, and if you don't want to do it, I will kill you, or I will take things from you, or the you, or I'll take one of your legs and wear it as a hat. So those are all possibilities.
I feel like the conflicted or the ignorant or unaware type of evil, if you can even call someone who is unaware that they're causing harm evil in the first place, I think that makes a better player character, and the, you know, unconflicted, reveling in it, I'm Maleficent and I just love cursing babies, that's more better for NPC villains, in my opinion, and that's not always true, but I find that, especially for players who want like to have that character growth and explore how characters change over time, because you're going to be playing this character for potentially a very long campaign. You don't want them to be the same the entire time. You want to see growth, you want to see change, and I think having someone who needs to learn something, who has conflict that they need to overcome, or flaws that they are, that, you know, might hinder them, are way more interesting to play than just a one-note villain.
I will say, as a bit of a counterpoint to that, sometimes people do enjoy playing evil characters because it allows you to explore themes that you can't explore in real life. And playing characters who are unrepentantly evil can be fun in that sense. The character that I played in Heart the City Beneath was an example of that. I can get into it a bit later on this panel, but that is one thing that I would say could stand also be taken into consideration. As far as the original question, I think there also, and this is a thing that we have touched on a bit, but I also think there is a distinction that needs to be made between evil and indifference. There are characters who like are actively sadistic and enjoy seeing people get hurt and like revel in it, and then there are characters who prioritize other things above other people's well-being, but try to just look away when they see the consequences of their actions, and are like willfully ignorant about it. But I would say ultimately both of those types of characters can be considered evil, but it's a spectrum.
Yeah, I agree, it's a spectrum. Both would be evil in different ways. Yeah.
The one that I would say, to the answer to your question, yes. And in the longer explanation is that it depends on what the character is being asked to do. So, evil for evil's sake, if the person playing the character is playing him that way, then yes, let him be like that. If the person is playing someone who's conflicted, then that should reflect back in his gameplay. An evil character shouldn't just be allowed to be evil without it reflecting either in them or the world. So it's one of those things where evil for evil's sake always has repercussions. So as the DM, I like it because that means I can bring my big guns to bear a lot sooner. So now a question for you guys. Let's go with Blue.
Out of curiosity, how would you guys judge a character like the agent of the council in the movie Serenity? Like, he definitely does some horrendous stuff, but it's for technically a greater good. He's trying to create a better world, and then at the end, when he's not remembers and now says they're a monster, he goes, of course I am. There's no place for me in the world I'm creating. But is he actually evil?
I'd say so.
Or is he just like lawful taking the extreme?
That is, I mean,
Can
that's
someone
not
repeat his question?
Oh, so the question is, I'm sorry, what was the name of the character again? I can't remember.
He's just the agent of the council.
The agent of the council in Serenity. Does he count as an evil character because when confronted and being told you're a monster, he's like, yeah, but I'm creating a world that will no longer need me. I think so. That is actually my favorite type of evil character because I feel like when a character has reasons for what they're like, they can actually coherently explain why they are doing the terrible things they are doing. That's much more interesting because then you have to grapple with their reasons and judge for yourself whether those reasons are valid or not. And so, yes, it is evil because, that's basically what devils do. Like, they're evil. They're lawyers. They're evil lawyers. And they're like, well, we're just, we gotta get souls to fight the blood war, and this is how we do it. We just got it. This is our job. They're still evil. And yeah, I find them evil, but the spiciest fun.
It's probably worth noting too that he knows what he's doing is wrong, but he's doing it anyway because he thinks it's necessary in the long term, which means fundamentally he knows what he's doing is evil. So yes, I would say he's evil because he precisely knows what he's doing in a very explicit, intentional way versus some of the other examples we've given. Yeah.
Well, there's like Thanos. Thanos has that same aspect to him. He's doing something horrendous to the universe, but he's doing it with purpose. And in the story itself, Thanos gets vanished after he's done what he's done. So he expects himself to be taken off the table. It's one of those evil for the good, for the greater good. There can be that.
One additional thing to think about is this thing called, the word for it is teleopathy. Teleopathy is goal sickness. It's from an ethics framework, but I am so focused on my goal that I am going to ignore the things that conflict with it. And this is often where the evil characters start to display willful and grave ignorance of the consequences because they're so focused on whatever goal they're focused on that they then justify and rationalize things. This is where we see it in real life too.
No.
I have not seen Serenity, so I can't really comment on that specific villain.
It's overrated.
Whoa! Whoa!
This is the evil final, baby.
I feel personally attacked. No, just kidding.
All right, so you asked the question. No, you're the next one.
I'm the next one. I haven't asked a question yet. Okay, I have a question for the panel, which I'm curious. How do you deal with, or have you played with characters who are doing really unspeakable things? I don't just mean like they walk into a dungeon and kill some kobolds, which is bad, but genocide, really dark stuff. Is that a thing that you've dealt with, or is that a thing that you've ignored, or how do you deal with it is really what I'm getting at.
I have played with a character like that. My character in my Monster Hearts campaign was, has anyone in here played Monster Hearts? No, well, Monster Hearts is basically it's a Powered by the Apocalypse game where you are playing high schoolers who are all secretly monsters, and it is basically like any CW drama in a role-playing game form. And my character was a half human, half demon who was, basically planted in a high school on Earth as an emissary from hell. And she encountered one of the other PCs who was a mule for supernatural contraband and had what was basically a celestial nuke inside of him without realizing it. And she made that her goal to get her hands on that celestial nuke by any means possible. And sorry, it was a long campaign. I'm trying to recall the timeline of events for this. Now, there's a couple things that you need to know about Monster Hearts going into this. One, given that it is very focused on drama, there is going to be a lot of PvP stuff going on. Two, given that it is a CW-style drama aimed at high schoolers who are all secretly monsters, there are mechanics for sex. And long story short, this sort of rivalry between her and the other player character led to her basically seducing this character as a cover to get the nuke and to get him to let his guard down. And that was a pretty unspeakable thing, both in terms of her using sex for manipulative purposes and in terms of her obtaining a weapon that could be used for mass destruction. And this was the reason why I think it played out as successfully as it did and we didn't have any problems with it was, one, these were people that I had played in campaigns with before. I was pretty familiar with all but one of the players at the table, and the person who was playing that other PC was actually like one of the first DMs that I had ever played with. It was someone who I had a very long history with. And several of the players at the table were also in a campaign that I just wrapped up, that Spire campaign I mentioned, which was specifically a kink-oriented campaign. So the idea of having dubious sexual situations involved in our TTRPGs was not completely off the table. I think if those are things that you have not negotiated with your players, and if you're not really familiar with your players, not something that I would advise for people who aren't super familiar with each other.
Something not to run at con.
I also will say, just like in general, safety tools are your friend. Make sure you use lines and veils, make sure you have the X card. I also will say though, one thing to be aware of when you are dealing with touchy narrative subjects, I will caution against writing down lines and veils for other people's sake. That is something that I encountered in a campaign once. I had a player who wrote down a theme that was like a very commonly listed line in his lines and veils list, but it wasn't actually a line of his. I know from other conversations that I had had with him. It was actually
just assuming that other people.
Yeah, but he was assuming that other people would not be okay with it, and that can backfire in some cases because one, it assumes that you know other people better than they know themselves, which can be kind of insulting, and also it can narratively stifle people if it's actually not a line or a veil for anyone else. Okay. So I did want to bring that up just while we're on the topic of safety tools.
I've had it go well, and I've had it go incredibly not well. Both times when I was a player, not a GM. The time where it went very poorly with these subjects was, it was just a dickhead player, basically. And the DM did not check his behavior as much as he should have. So this terrible, evil, this dickhead, he murdered our boss / quest giver for no particular reason, and then he kidnapped a teenage NPC and bullied her into killing herself, and it's yeah, and I left the game is how I handled it, because I was like, fuck this guy, I don't want to play with him anymore. And I did not come back to that game group until he was gone, and then when he tried to get back in, I bullied him the hell out of it. I was like, you are not allowed, you're not going to be here anymore. And so that was the bad one, and it was because he wasn't doing it for any narrative purpose. He was doing it because he thought it'd be funny. He was doing it because he liked getting a rise out of people.
He thought he was edgy.
He thought he was edgy, exactly. He was an
That's
edgelord.
the difference between evil character and dickhead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But we did have one experience that actually went well, and it's because it had a narrative purpose, and it was arguably even worse, which is when the party committed a genocide. And so the story is that we came to a floating city that was inhabited by water elves. Basically, we reskinned the Genasi to be elemental elves, is what we call them. There's a whole backstory to it, so that doesn't matter. So but the water elves are the ruling class of this floating city, and they use slave labor basically to maintain their way of life. They enslave all sorts of other races, and then the water elves are on top. And we're like, well, this is messed up. Let's get a revolution going. And so we tried to get a socialist uprising going. We did not adequately prepare for it, so our intentions were good. It was promptly quashed, and then one thing led to another, and we're like, oh, what if we overloaded this reactor and then like had the reactor explode? Oh, then we could like really put a dent in their defenses. We blew up the whole city. And that was where not all the water elves, but where the vast majority of water elves lived. But the reason it worked out is that there were narrative consequences that were felt campaigns and campaigns later. Like, this was not something that we just did because it was funny and like, haha, and then we never talked about it again. Like, this terrible, terrible event has come up in every single campaign we've run in that setting since. It meant something, and that is what's important.
Yeah, and going back to that, the idea of consequences, one thing I did forget to mention when I gave my own example is there were consequences for that as well. My character, because she was only half human, did not exactly have an entire soul. And the GM told me, like, if you want to get this celestial nuke from this other player character, you will lose what's left of your soul in the process. And the consequences of that definitely occurred in the subsequent sessions of the campaign, ended with her basically getting banished to a realm of her own creation and being left to live there alone because she was trying to find a safe place to store the celestial nuke, and it backfired.
Did you want to have any thoughts of anybody?
Oh, let's go on to another question.
What orange in the back?
As players, what can we do to support DMs who are hesitant to have evil characters?
Talk to them?
Remember that DMs have lines and veils too. Like,
Yeah.
DMs
What are
allowed
lines
to-
and veils?
Oh, okay. Who wants to explain?
I'll explain, okay. So, Lines and Veils is a safety tool used in TTRPGs, and a line is a topic that you do not want explored at all in the campaign. A veil is a topic that you're okay with it being mentioned in passing or like happening in a character's backstory or what have you, anything where it's not described in detail, but you don't want graphic descriptions of it.
Yeah.
Or
And
act it out, or
Yeah.
Yeah, it can happen off screen or fade to black or something like that, but it's not explored in character in game.
yeah, and people write these down at like usually during session 0. I like to have people just like write them down anonymously and give them to me rather than saying them out loud, just so people don't feel pressured to write more or less than what they want to put, or so and so people don't have access to other people's triggers, but they could potentially use against them.
I prefer to do it the private way and then just make it these are non-negotiable. And there will not be arguments, and you should not approach anybody to figure out who wrote them down.
Yep.
Just make a master list.
Yes.
And say this is the no-go
as well.
period.
And it's perfectly okay to do that while you're into the campaign too, while you're into the play. It's like you could do a check. Let's do like our our sessions 0 lines and veils check, and then send stuff to me. How are we doing?
Yeah, and I might as well explain what the X card is as well for anyone who doesn't know what that is. So it is a card with an X drawn on it that you put in the center of the table, and if something happens during your session that somebody is not okay with, you tap the X in the middle of the table and you say, hey, I'm not okay with with this theme being, being described in the campaign, can we make a change about that here? And not incorporate that. And it's basically designed for,
It's like a safe word.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. It is basically the tabletop equivalent of a safe word, and it's great for instances where either there's, a line or a bill that somebody didn't know about or forgot to list, or for anything that, that you just can't prepare for in advance.
Yeah.
It's good for new players too, like if they don't know where their comfort zone is, just having that, knowing, oh, okay, this is, apparently I don't like this, you can kind of stop it.
Well,
yeah, please.
For a lot of that, I mean, in that session 0, you should speak about how deep do you want to go? What are you willing, as a group, these are the hard stops. We're willing to do relationships, but we're not going to do such. If that happens, fade to black, the next one.
And to kind of bring back to the original question of what you can do to help your DM, in addition to having everyone say, okay, these are these are my no-go zones. It's also good to say, hey, I'm okay if you do X, Y, Z to my character. When I make characters, like there are some that I'm like, yeah, do this bad. I really want this bad thing to happen to my character. I think it'd be very interesting narratively. And so then the DM will work that in, or you can tell other players, I'm fine with you PvPing with me in this scene, like let's do that because that seems to make sense. So telling, not only just saying what you don't want the DM to do, but what you do want the DM to do can really help when it comes to figuring out how do you deal with the consequences of these bad actions.
Capture my character in the story and put them into a...
Oh, I'm a writer. I love it when people torture my characters.
Something that you constantly want to do as a DM and as a player, constant communication. Once the session is done, don't leave. Have a conversation afterwards. How did it go? What worked? What didn't? It helps your DM get better, and it helps you as a character find what you're willing to do and not do.
It's your turn. That's a question.
All right. I think the question that I definitely want to ask here is, why do people enjoy playing evil characters? Do you want me to start, or should we go down the line?
I mean, I can say why I enjoy.
Let's start that side, and then we'll...
Sure. Now let's go down this way.
So I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier when I said that when an evil person or an evil character has a coherent ideology that they're following and can articulate why they're doing their evil things, that means you have to reckon with it and decide for yourself. And I kind of use evil characters as a way to test my own ethics and say, okay, this is a character doing something that I would normally consider reprehensible. Are my thoughts on this valid? Why would someone else think this way? Try and understand why someone else would think differently. So I enjoy them as an ethics exercise. That's why I enjoy doing it.
For me, I'm with you, Matt. For my players, honestly, it's most often I have had a hard week and I just want to kick some ass and have the power and have the ability to use it without immediate consequences. So it's kind of light, evil light for the sake of releasing from the week's pressures.
I like the idea of the releasing of pressures, because that's certainly my experience running games, where sometimes players just want to let go. They don't want to think about, it's not real, right? So they can kind of let go of the consequences. Like, you can't run around with a sword and being annoying to the blacksmith in town, right? Or steal things from people or whatever. Those are things you can't literally do. So the release. But I also think of it a little bit like a science, where there are certain experiments you can't do in science because they're grossly unethical, but they would produce answers that are meaningful to us. We just can't do them for good reason. Well, in role-playing games, we can explore the potential consequences of doing things that we recognize that are immoral in our lives in a way that is safe from actually hurting anyone that exists within the reasons of your game. But yeah, and I think that can be meaningful. because TTRPGs can be an exploration of the human experience, the dark sides of it and the good sides.
I was about to say, did we skip over someone here?
Yeah. I apologize.
I don't mind, I like doing the last grapple. For me, the aspect of playing evil characters is an expression of myself. So I love creating characters that get to explore a darkness that is, I mean, it is a human thing. We get mad, we get angry, we allow those things to fester. Being able to tap into that portion of me also helps me as a DM because it makes me a heck of a lot darker in the games that I can bring. Expressing yourself in a dark way helps you make better villains down the road. The other aspect there that I find is that why people like playing evil characters is because it's fun. Most characters have some stick up their butt. The evil character can just let go. And it's like, I've had an evil character that walks in and is the Snow White scene where she's got the bird on her finger and they're singing, and the next moment somebody does something that pisses her off and she almost got his head off. And in this particular case, it wasn't even a thing that, I was making a mean girl. It was just, she had a volatile nature to her, and it was one of the things that made her so much fun. You were never quite sure which side of her you were getting. So it's like, I had so much fun. It makes me act, because I'm very, very, animated and, just bouncing off walls when I'm playing these kind of characters. And it's so much fun to do.
I like the description of the evil character as basically unclenched. It's fun.
So, one from you guys. Blue.
Have you ever had an occasion where the evil character of the party was the more rational, we have to get things done guy? Because one of my favorite campaigns, I was basically playing as a lawful evil Machiavellian necromancer. Most of the party were good-alike, but they were basically going around, oh hey, evil dragon, let's beat the crap out of him. Oh hey, Goose Bandits, let's beat the crap out of them. And I'm like, we're trying to stop an invasion of the realm so we have a place to live. I don't mind if we take over that dragon's horde. I don't care if we subjugate the bandits and turn them to our cause, but we don't want the bad guy to complete the ritual because then there'll be demons everywhere.
Yeah, my necromancer was the team mom. And I think it's because the thing that goal blindness that I think you mentioned earlier, because evil characters, especially lawful evil characters, are very goal oriented. And if that goal is the party goal, then they are going to move heaven and earth and also the Feywild and the Shadowfell and everything else to get that goal done. So I think that, yeah, when played well, an evil character is very great at keeping a party on task.
Well, stop talking ethics and just get this.
I'm sorry!
The other, it's that whole aspect of the way that they're being practical. Like they're being practical to meet their goal. So, I mean, they're still being selfish bastards.
True.
Was my turn to ask a question?
It is your turn.
So this is one that actually I was thinking about a lot. How do you differentiate between an evil character and a character that has what I think TV tropes calls a blue and orange morality? One example that I've been puzzling over for ever since I encountered him, I was running a game and one of my players was playing a hobgoblin, I believe, who are portrayed as kind of Klingon-esque in our setting. So he was doing everything he thought that he was doing. He thought he was doing the just and honorable and right thing. For example, he's like, I've come across these dead bodies of people that were killed by bandits. And he started doing things that to the rest of the party was desecrating of a body. But to him was like, no, this is what you do to murder victims. This is just the just and right way to do it. And it was really interesting because his actions in any other context would be considered evil, and he would be considered an evil character, but because of how he was played and how his intent was played, it was more like, no, his just sense of what right and wrong is just completely at, like, it's a hypercube of morality, what's going on.
I think a lot of it boils down to how worldly those characters are and whether they have heard the perspectives of people with other moralities. If they are, if they've talked with other PCs and NPCs that have morality that differs from theirs and is, seen as more stereotypically quote-unquote good, and they continue to double down on their behavior even after having it explained to them that what they're doing might be wrong, then we start to tread away from the blue and orange morality realm and into that character becoming overtly evil, because they now know what the consequences of their actions are and they're still continuing to do them. But if they don't have that level of, of worldliness and experience and being informed, then I think we can safely say that it is in that blue and orange morality realm.
Sure. I mean, this feels to me like a question about moral relativism in a TTRPG, which in the real world is an actual problem that philosophy deals with, but in a fantasy world that we invent in our minds, is something where we may actually have a situation where characters have drastic different cultural experiences, and we typically don't have games where characters stop and say, let's have the moral conversation. Like, bring up Kant and like all of these characters, and whatever the version of Kant is in that universe. But that could be a really good place to have that conversation where we don't just say, well, this culture is just different and it's okay for him to eat the fingers off the dead bodies. I've never had that situation though, and now I really want to have that situation.
And the best part was that player, he made his character's name a secret pun that no one noticed until the very last session.
Oh, nice.
I'll tell you afterwards, maybe not to right now.
I'd just be echoing stuff you guys already said.
And blue?
I'm not familiar with the term blue and orange. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So it's basically a contrast to the term black and white thinking or black and white morality or gray morality. Just the idea that, we as humans have a spectrum of morality from, ranging from good to evil. And there are some characters like Fae or Eldritch Abominations who are so far removed from humanity that their morality exists outside of that. Yeah, that's where that term originates.
Can you repeat that, Lauren?
Sorry. That was it.
It's TV tropes.
Yeah, you can look it up on TV tropes and you'll find it. That's where the term originates.
One of the things that I have a problem with evil player characters is whose interpretation of evil. It's one of those things. It's like, if I can craft a character where all these mannerisms that you are seeing as evil are common. So, it's one of those things where it's why I hate alignment. I believe that characters need to be organic, and you're going to have a piss of fire at some point who's not going to be able to turn off. That doesn't make him evil. Now, he goes off and he starts killing children and just goes to town. That can be the start of a downward spiral into being evil. And that's my 2 minutes. Pink in the back.
Have you had any experience with an evil character in the party deliberately and carefully turning other party members evil.
I'm working on it right now.
I pulled a whole party to hell. I was an evangelical paladin. And I made everybody sign my pact, and we went to hell to let loose the most horrible of evils on the world so that my god could get its power.
I don't have experience playing a character that was like trying to turn other characters evil in the sense that those characters know what they were doing, but my Monster Hearts character definitely was the type to use other PCs as pawns and make them unwittingly do stuff that served her evil goals. I mentioned already her getting the Celestial WMD from one of the other player characters. There was also another PC in our party who was a werewolf, and she basically kept stringing that character along with promises of "I will cure your lycanthropy if you just keep doing one more evil thing for me," and that was very fun to play with.
That is evil.
It wasn't necessarily evil per se, but probably one of my favorite games I ever ran was many years ago. I was running a Legend of the Five Rings campaign. For those unfamiliar, Legend of the Five Rings is set in a fantasy realm that draws very strongly from feudal Japan. So it has a very strong caste system where you have the samurai class, the peasant class, and then the untouchables and that sort of thing. And my goal with that campaign was to pit the samurai character's sense of ethics and honor and morality against the modern American player's sense of ethics and fairness and everything, and I wanted to see what they would do with that. And my hope was that half of them would side with the peasant revolt and the other half would decide to crush the peasant revolt, and that is exactly what happened, and I was never happier in my life. Seeing those players just rip into each other in the last session, I was like, yes! So good.
Yep.
Have you ever had a situation where a character who was evil was not hiding, but was not advertising? I managed to get a 10-year-old neutral good little wizard, and it was I get what essentially amounts to I left my jewel on the floor over there. Yeah, you're hanging from a cliff. Oh, you want me to help? So my jewel, anyway, and just shoved them off the cliff. And then my party was like, what the hell, man? And I'm like, were you not paying attention?
One of the characters I've been playing recently in the City of Heroes, City of Villains game online is a psychic or psionic telepath inquisitor. So, chief of the zone of a city, basically, of the evil empire, and responsible for counterintelligence and loyalty. You know that she's responsible for mind probing members of the evil empire organization to ensure they stay loyal. And then, of course, she's walking into a bar. People know what she does. The only catch for that situation is that in this superhero, supervillains situation, a lot of the people that she's walking into the bar with are way more powerful directly than her. So the evil of, hey, I've got this position, I've got these powers, this is my job, this is my jurisdiction you're in. It has to be kind of tempered with practicality of not getting on her ass handed to her.
You can go ahead or something.
This is less in the realm of like not advertising it versus advertising it, and more in the realm of kind of flip-flopping between helpful and evil on a whim. But in my Spire campaign that I ran, I had these two recurring NPCs, one of whom was part of a cult that worshipped guns, and the other was a worshiper of a luck goddess, and they were partners in crime, who initially came into the campaign because the party was tasked with kidnapping them for a prisoner exchange, and subsequently busting them out because they were also allies of the revolutionary cell that the party was a part of. And because these two characters were basically only in it for themselves, they were very much like mercenary types who didn't really have any particular allegiances. They were willing to ally with the party at first because there was another member of that same gun-worshipping cult in the party. But at one point, there's a mechanic in Spire called Fallout, which basically replaces any sort of like death or injury type consequences in your standard D&D. But basically, it's a variety of what could go wrong events that occur when you take a certain amount of stress in the game. And a character got a fallout called Rumor, which means that the party makes up 3 rumors about your character, 2 true and 1 false, that spread about you, and those come to a head in the next couple of sessions. One of those rumors, the false one, was that character was encroaching on the turf of these 2 partners in crime. And so the tables got turned, and those 2 NPCs ended up kidnapping a few members of the party, partially as revenge, but also partially because they were wanted by the government, and it was a good excuse to make some money. And it was very much a situation of like, yes, these characters were allied with you, but ultimately they are in it for themselves, and I have told you this in previous sessions, so they are going to come looking for revenge, both for that rumor and for you guys kidnapping them at some point eventually. And some of it was revenge, some of it was also, definitely could have been considered evil because those characters were very selfish by nature and didn't really particularly care about what happened to the party ultimately.
The one thing that I would say about your character pushing the 10-year-old off the cliff, not to say that you had to have had that conversation before, any of that gameplay. But if you're playing your character to your character, I don't see anything wrong with it. If that's the way that your character has been being played, there's nothing wrong. But if this character who's been okay with things going on, all of a sudden just shoves a kid off the cliff, that would be one of those situations where, as a DM, I clearly decide, okay, what's going on?
Yeah, the thing is that like my gaming group that I usually play with, we've been playing together for many years, and we do a lot of chatter about our characters and about the campaign between sessions. And in fact, they're playing right now, and my phone's on. And the thing is that like we don't keep surprises like that from each other just because we like to talk about how our characters relate to each other. So like someone will be like, oh man, my character's so pissed at that NPC, like she might attack him in the next session, and then the rest of us will be like, well, if that happens, then this will be, and then we talk about how we kind of almost soft role play that hypothetical out to see what would happen. So if it does happen, we're already on board and we're already like, have bought into it. And I really do think that's very helpful if you're playing an evil character. We don't even usually talk about our characters in terms of good and evil. We just talk about what are their motivations, what are their traumas, what are their hang-ups, and that's what we use to inform their behavior. And honestly, like having that constant like chatter about the way our characters relate to each other very much helps with playing those more evil characters.
It's 4:30 now.
Whoops.
So, sorry about that. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation here. If you're looking to play an evil character, I hope this gave you some ideas. If you're running campaigns and you haven't allowed people to play evil characters, please think about it. I've read all evil campaign where everybody was an evil character and there was backstabbing and double dealing, and everybody had their own agenda to try to get to the end. So, and it was hilarious. So it's one of those things. Try it. It can be a lot of fun.
And it's okay to set yourself a limit. Like, we're going to do this for you know, like 2 months or a certain number of game sessions or something too. Just
Yeah.
try it out, see how it works.
Yeah.
Okay,
And if anyone,
One shot.
I was just in case if anyone has any questions that didn't get answered, I'm happy to stick around for another 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, I can stick around for a couple.
I have